Okay, well, joining us now to explain what this all means is adjunct accounting professor for Montclair State University, Dan Geltrude, and the president of Walser Wealth Management, tax attorney Rebecca Walser. Dan, we're going to start with you. CPI up a little bit. We see the Dow kind of tanking today, though it was close to all-time highs here. What do you make of this?
I don't know why the markets are so surprised that inflation is up, to be quite honest with you. Listen, I don't care what these numbers say. Year over year, okay, it's up 3.1% inflation. But people are feeling this. That's the main point here. Purchasing power is way down. You have not had wages rising to the extent we've experienced inflation. Since Joe Biden became president, inflation is up 18%. So you have to look at that cumulative total. And when you look at that, I don't know, again, why the markets are so surprised.
Rebecca, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was in Pittsburgh today, and she said that the Biden administration has made significant progress in its fight to bring down inflation. Yellen citing lower prices for gas, eggs, and airline fares in her remarks. But we know for sure that Americans are still feeling the pinch. We even saw, instead of doing that Super Bowl interview, President Biden did a pre-taped video inventing something called shrinkflation, where instead of blaming himself for high prices, he blamed snack companies.
Yeah, Katrina, this is exactly right. And this is the problem. And to Dan's point and to everyone's point that Bob made, you know, I don't like the headlines that come out. The market is finally getting it and seeing it. And that's what we're seeing, the pullback today. And like you said, the Dow has hit 12 highs. The S&P has hit over 8 highs, all-time highs when they didn't have any highs in 2023. So they had major resistance, completely broke out, and now are hitting these lows today, pulling back because once again, they're realizing, no, we're not going to get a March cut. We probably aren't going to get a May cut. We might get a cut in June if we're lucky. But I don't like the headlines that come out and say inflation is cooling, because they don't mean that inflation is cooling. They mean the rate of inflation expanding is slowing down. But to Dan's point, you're talking about 18% price increases since this administration has gone into power, and people feel that with their pocketbook at the kitchen table. And that is why there is a disconnect between the underlying economy and the American stock market.
We can just wipe away any of those gains anybody just had with that giant dip today here. Dan, I want to reiterate this and talk about this a little bit more. At 3% here, but it's the overall body of work with the Biden administration here. Hence why people can't afford their groceries anymore. The rent payments are through the roof here. You're paying in excess of 18% more than what you used to. And you brought up a great fact. I was going to bring it up if you didn't hear. Wages haven't kept up with anything here. They haven't really kept up for a long time here, and that's the main crux of the issue.
Yeah, it really is. Look, if you look at all the areas that are experiencing inflation, rent up over 6% year over year, car insurance 20%, electricity 4%. And how about this? Because this really hurts. A Big Mac meal is $18. I mean, when we're getting to that point, I'm feeling that. That's a terrible thing. And what the administration is doing, which makes no sense, right? They are still spending money. There's still stimulus out there while the Fed is trying to keep interest rates, well, where they are, or maybe raising them. So the effect here is that you have 1 foot on the gas, 1 foot on the brake, and they're both going at full tilt. What happens? Well, you end up doing donuts, and that's where we are economically right now because of these policies.
Rebecca, can you give us any insight, any good news as to when Americans will stop feeling this pressure? It truly is a heavy weight.
It is. And I wish I had great news, but unfortunately, I do think that 2024 is going to be a year of reckoning. We've seen that China's already lost $7 trillion in market capitalization of their stock market. We see that Germany is deindustrializing because their lack of cheap energy from Russia is basically making it economically unviable for them to be a manufacturing country. We're just seeing massive global shifts, and it is going to affect America as well. So I wish I had great news. You know, to Dan's point about wages, you saw this great labor number in January of 353,000 jobs, but the over and even hourly wage increases, but the overall compensation for January went down. And it's because even though employers are keeping people employed and keeping their hours, their pay rate hourly higher, they're cutting their hours so that the overall total compensation is going down. We see savings levels now at 2008 pre-global financial crisis levels.
Wow.
And this is all just auto loan defaults and delinquency is rising. Credit card delinquency is rising to a level we haven't seen since 2011. So I think, unfortunately, the writing is kind of on the wall, and Americans need to prepare for this to be a bad overall declining year and a kind of a right-setting year because we've had so much stimulus since 2020.
All right. Well, I wish we had some good news. But again, Dan Geltrude, Rebecca Walser, we appreciate your shooting us straight on all this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.